Hi, I am your host, Henry Clavo, CEO and founder of Orlando Insight Group. Each episode, we dive into real conversations with technology leaders, innovators, experts who are shaping the future of IT data, cybersecurity, and leadership. Our goal is simple to give practical insights, real world strategies, and perspective that you can use to drive smarter decisions and stronger results for your business. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Laurin Lilly-Laona Friedrich, a German author, independent scholar, government professional whose work examines how institutions translate formal expectations into everyday organizational reality. Laurin was educated in law and economics and holds a PhD from Oxford Brookes University. With more than a decade of experience in international financial services, she has worked at the intersection of regulations, governance, risk, institutional design. Her perspective is distinctly international, having lived, studied, and worked across Ireland, England, South America, and Germany. Speaking German, English, Spanish, Lauren brings a deeply intercultural understanding of how people interpret systems differently and what allows institutions to remain coherent across cultural and professional and organizational boundaries. Her forthcoming book, The Signals of Organization Misalignment, Reading Drift Before Business Systems Break, explores the hidden patterns and human architecture that shape institutions long before problems become visible through formal structure or performance metrics. Lauren, welcome to the OIG podcast. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. I'm glad that we're able to connect through LinkedIn and share your insights on the Bank of England. So, I guess my first question is what your work explores how institutions translate formal expectation into lived organizational reality. What
Yeah.
first made you realize that there could be significant gap between the rules of an institution creates and the way it actually functions?
I think just observation. I'm generally somebody who likes to discover, who's like very curious by nature. It has always been sort of like my nature to try to investigate things. And when I first started working in corporate environments, no matter which company I worked, no matter like if it was finance or non-finance, there were always a lot of procedures, a lot of policies, and you just slowly you start to realize, okay, but that's not all. That's not everything. To like, there are very experienced colleagues who would do things differently, but with good reason, or there would be people who would have like new approaches to things. So I think just understanding why has been the curiosity behind it.
Yeah, I coming from the United States, more of a technology guy. I like to explore systems and processes. Uh, what got you into it? What was the catalyst for you to study these complex systems and processes now that it governs your current life?
Well, if you look at systems theory, I feel like trying to explain very complex relationships and how they interact with each other and what sort of secondary processes come or may come out of them. So I think just trying to explain that and the fact that I feel like it hasn't been fully explained yet how that actually works. And it feels like there's still development table, and it wasn't one single moment in time. It was more accumulation of years of observation and just being like, okay, this might have some of the answers, and maybe I can help find some more. Just yeah.
Yeah, it's a deeply exploratory process. A very, very.
It is.
It requires curiosity and the subject and topic that you're interested in. You're right
Exactly.
that regulations, technology, or governance systems never moves directly into organizational reality. It must first pass through human interpretation. Why is interpretation such an important but frequently overlooked part of implementation?
Because when you look into a lot of corporate institutions, they are very good in like saying, okay, we have this new guideline or we have this new corporate policy, and then they go, every team sort of takes it, and just because it says I don't know, risk assessment, for example,
Mhm.
a risk assessment in IT means something completely different than a risk assessment in HR or risk assessment in supplier management. So just because the title of what you're supposed to do is the same doesn't mean that the actual interpretation that the team has or that the actual practical implications, the steps they do in order to achieve that is the same. So just because it has the same title, it doesn't really always create a transferable outcome. And I think that is really important to keep in mind when you're talking about implementation, because I can set a standard, but if I'm not aware of how it's interpreted or how this meaning is changed from team to team, I will have very different outcomes.
It makes sense because me working in data, I need to define the definitions by working with stakeholders who are in charge of the business. What is a profit? What is this term? If it's not aligned, then you're just returning ROI, but you're not measuring it correctly. You're taking a statistics that's misinterpreted, and then the whole process goes down. So that makes sense. Can you give us an example of a policy or technology that appeared clear on paper but became something very different once people began applying it?
Oh, it's difficult to come down to one. I think
multitude of policies.
Yeah, so I think what helps me, or what helps when I try to tackle those sort of problems, is to actually look into the intention behind it. So when there is a new policy in Europe, we have DORA, for example, which is like one of the major IT policies in Europe, and it has been a big change, particularly within the financial industry, like before DORA, after DORA. It's kind of two timelines. But rather than going by letter of what it actually asks you, I actually start by questioning of trying to figure out what is the intention behind it. So what are they trying to improve, or what are they trying to protect the customer or the company against? And that requires sometimes not reading only the text of the actual guidelines or the actual regulation, but reading like the strategies or reading like associated papers. And that then helps you to actually understand, okay, is the purpose resilience? Is the purpose adaptability? Is the purpose customer protection? So depending on that purpose, you get a really good understanding of where you need to shift towards. And that then helps to make it unifiable, really.
And there obviously there's regulators if you're not following it through a process, do you get in trouble, or you have flexibility to work on new rules that come into the market?
Both, I would say. So there are very, how to say, like boundaries, and you have to keep within the boundaries, and it's like heavily regulated in Europe, the financial services industry. So not only banking, but also leasing. So everything that has to do with sort of financial and insurance as well, for example. So you have a very tight set of boundaries, and governance is like everywhere, but you are able to tailor it to a certain extent. So there's proportionality, or there are regulations who are able to, depending on how you operate, you can tailor it to your market or to your customers. And that helps. It does help, but it's still, that's, I think, maybe one of the things that caught my eye about this whole governance topic. It's so heavily regulated, but still people move out of that framework of regulation and of internal procedures. So I think that was maybe one of the points where I was like, okay, that's really interesting.
You're the first that express interest in procedures. Now, the first for the podcast. When leaders see that a policy has been implemented and the required box has been checked, what might conventional compliance reports still fail to reveal? So this is probably the human element.
Yeah, so I think it's great, when you are able to actually say, okay, we have completed this project. So usually, when you have a regulation, or even when you introduce a new IT system or something, a data management system, you have like a process map, and you're like really relieved once you come to the end of it, and you're like, oh, okay, it's done. I've implemented it. I've changed my procedures. I have changed my working instructions. Everything is fine. But for me, that's actually the starting point of where it gets interesting. Because then when I look into the teams or when I talk to the managers a year later, you discover, instead of 3 steps, they're doing 5. Why are they doing 5? Because, when it was initially set up, they forgot to ask an important question. Or maybe because the customers actually get confused by what has set up. So they have to do an additional step to clarify or to check. So this is something like, I'm like, okay, we have implemented, it's like a trial now. Well, let's see how it actually is run.
Exactly.
And then we get back to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the human element. I'll provide an example, though. Well, it's a very lame example, but essentially we were governing our email inboxes, and then we had a meeting to discuss what goes in it, how we label it, and then we just spend the hour deciding how to do it. But in your case, not only you're implementing regulation and governance, but you also are working with people. How do you balance those 3 aspects and being successful at your work?
I think it's just about actually asking good questions. So I think most of the time it's, not forcing people to defend themselves or to defend why they're doing something different, but being open and like asking the questions, explain to me why this works better. Tell me what you're missing. And this is sort of the kind of questions that actually reveal a lot about the thought process that people have behind their adaptations. And that most of the time is actually something beneficial for the procedures then as well, because the people who actually work with them, they understand a lot more about the needs and necessities than a manager or head of might. So it is also being very collaborative and just being open and curious. I think my curiosity is a really good benefactor in that point.
Yeah, you want collaboration, but you don't want them to shut down when you provide that criticism. And it makes sense because we're human. We want to belong in a sense.
Exactly. And for me, it's never about blaming, because just because I blame an individual employee, I haven't gained anything for the organization. So for me, it's just really unlogic, to kind of assign a blame to one person when it's actually like a procedure that isn't written well, or a control that isn't performing as it should, or a manager who's not good at communicating. So if that is like the underlying problem, why should I blame one single employee for something that he discovered and he is doing differently? So for me, it's more diagnostics. It's like diagnosing rather than blaming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if well, one person can have a big picture, but once you're part of an organization, it's very different. So you're pretty much diagnosing and understanding the process and trying to build change as well as build a new governance structure.
Exactly.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about your book, Recognizing Organizational Drift. You write that drift rarely begins in dramatic failures, but in quiet corners where no one is looking. What exactly do you mean by organizational drift?
Organizational drift is sort of like the accumulation of the little things. It's mainly, things that have been always done like that and nobody knows why. Or, you're sitting in a meeting on a Thursday afternoon and you're asking anybody any questions and you get absolutely no response. That's sort of like, people shutting down, people not able or not willing to open themselves and communicate anymore, or the quiet workarounds that just happen because the process as it's written, it's inefficient. So that's like drift is sort of like the shift from the intention of the company towards something else, and it's not always bad, but you need to be aware of it.
Yeah, I guess a person from your field and your profession, how can you train for this? How can you not be part of the system, but be objective about it?
I would say you're always part of the system, whether you want to or not. Every change you do, every interaction you have, it's minutely affecting the system. You cannot be in the system and not affect it, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So what I try to do is just raise awareness and like being very mindful and very conscious about the interactions that are happening and the intended or unintended consequences that come maybe out of those interactions. And taking on a lot of feedback. It's really, it's going both ways. So I ask a lot of questions, but I have to be open to also receive a lot of feedback about how I communicate, or where I might have shot over my goal. And so it is really being very mindful. And it's a humbling experience, I would say.
Can you share an experience that you had in your career that you give and take from working in an organization?
So one where it was like a couple of years back, and I wasn't actually, back then I wasn't aware of my impact as much, and I was just starting out, actually looking into this kind of work. And I observed a colleague who was customer facing. So he experienced a lot of pressure, time pressure from his management, having to close a lot of deals, closing a lot of things. And I was just observing this kind of tension that he was under. And I was talking to him, and he was like, it is so nice to be recognized for the work that I'm doing. And in that moment, I was like, really, oh, I didn't mean to make you feel in this way, but I was like, oh, it's good that you realize that. And it made me question, my positive or my negative impact that I might have with people. And similarly, I've had feedback of like, sometimes being maybe a little bit too curious, like asking too many questions and making people feel like they're investigated. So that is something that I had to calibrate and, sort of be mindful about when it's enough to stop, when my curiosity is like maybe overboarding and leave it for another day. So, it happens. And I think if you are just very open about it and you're like, okay, right, I understand, I get your point. Next time we do it differently. I think people, they want something from you and you want something from them. So, they're likely to collaborate in the end.
Yes, I agree with you. If you come a certain way, it really does affect that dynamic. I'll give you an example. When I came in as a consultant for a company, I was looked at as a person that was coming to take someone's job or replace them, or provide recommendations to do improvements. So it wasn't a joyful experience, but it was a learning experience of the relationship of being part of the organization, and also person coming outside of the organization and going into it, and learning how to manage those dynamics, even though you were not positioned in the correct way. So you have to find solutions to make it work.
Exactly. And that's actually one of the big learnings that I had, was precisely that, about the blame. Like, it's never about blaming somebody. It's always about finding a solution that makes it better for everyone. So that has been sort of my go-to approach. And like, I feel like people relax a lot once they've understood that. And it's like not about, pointing fingers. So I think that that is a good way for me.
Or build a bridge,
Yeah.
or as the Americans would say, an olive branch.
Yeah.
One example in your book is the handover that always requires one extra email. Why can such a seemingly minor inconvenience reveal something important about the wider system?
So if you look in that example, it's like, again, I would start asking a lot of questions. When I hear something like that, I would ask a lot of questions. Okay, so, what is the handover about? Why can it not be done directly? Is there maybe a history between the people or the teams that are handing over? Has there happened something in the past where they feel the need that they need to evidence, through an email maybe, that they have done it? So a lot of procedural things just happen because people carry their bag, and their history with other teams and with other people, and they feel like, oh, I need to do this because in the past XYZ happened. So so I would ask again a lot of questions, just to understand exactly the why behind it.
Yeah.
Because once I understand the why, that completely shifts the perception. If it is something that maybe an external auditor, and audit requested that it's evidenced by an email, then fine, let's formalize it, let's put it in a process, it's now officially part of it. If it's just something where somebody's carrying a lot of package, then it might be another, then you kind of, maybe you have to talk about let's have a team day, let's try to find another solution to this thing. So the why tells you a lot more than people usually realize.
And I'm sure you're triggering a lot of people's, I guess, lack of a better word, traumas, and so I guess they dread going through the process, going meet the other team departments, having meetings. I'm sure you have to deal with a lot of that.
Yeah, and I'm not free from it myself, to be honest. So I have people I prefer to work with, and I have people where I'm like, oh, okay. So it happens to all of us, but I think it's part of the human experience. And if you're aware that everybody is like that, absolutely everybody is like that, I think there's always like a common ground. And there's one chapter in my book where I also actually talk about this point, and it's based on an example where I always felt like she was a team lead as well. And always when I had to interact with her, I felt like she was very protective. Like she didn't want to collaborate more than she needed. She didn't want to hand over more than she needed. So like she would do the bare minimum of, collaboration. And that used to annoy me a lot. And I used to be like, why, And much later on, I actually realized she was doing it to protect her team, to protect her people from not being burnt out or not being abused by others, not doing kind of free work for people. And that really shifted my perception a lot, because I was like, okay, she was not doing it against me. She was doing it for her team. And that's, completely understandable.
Definitely. And it's a double-edged sword. You can do that, but you can also lose sight of what the organization is trying to accomplish, the changes, and why changes occur. So it's a very tricky balance. Moving on, how can leaders distinguish between an isolated inefficiency and an early warning of a deeper organizational misalignment?
I think time usually tells. So this is, I think, something, or that is one of the main aims of my book, is to kind of help people be more sensitive to the early warnings and what they might or might not be. It's not that every minute detail necessarily has to be a signal of drift or has to be a signal of something bigger, but it could be, right? And just being like, okay, maybe there's more behind it. And I think it's a difference, for example, when we talk about collaboration. It's a difference if I have a really good collaborative team spirit and I cover for my colleague for a 2-day period while he's off sick or he's, on vacation, than me covering for a 6-month period because a colleague has just left and there's no replacement. So it's, it's the same act, but the timing is different, the context is different, and one is collegial, team, absolutely fine, and the other one is just a resource matter that needs to be addressed. And I think that is like the thing where you have to be mindful of. It's not a black versus white. There's a gray scale, and you just need to be aware of like on which point of the scale are you on right now. Like, where are you? Yeah.
That's very hard to balance, especially when a person is within the organization. They cannot step back and look at the whole picture. I guess what would you recommend to balance that, to be able to look at those situations they recognize? Is a skill that they can learn, or they need to work with a coach to help remedy that?
No, I don't think it depends. I would say it depends. So the way I see it is that I've become very careful about being generalistic and giving like general, 10 steps to succeed, whatever. Because it depends a lot on the industry you're working in. It depends a lot on the team you're working in, the size of the company, the purpose, like the strategy, is my purpose to grow, is my purpose to maintain, what am I doing, right? So depending on the whole set, the way to get there or the way to become better might be very different from one company to the next. And this is why I refuse to, in my book or anywhere, to give like the 10-step plan, because I'm like, no, I can help you to be more sensitive. I can help you to notice things that maybe you have noticed before. I can, one of the feedback from the early readers of my book has been, yes, it is like that, and now I know how to say it. And maybe it's just that capability of being able to name what you have observed, of being able to, match the interaction and match the signal or whatever is going on with the wider concept. And I think that is the main help, actually, just this awareness and this capability of being able to see and to speak.
Recognize, yes, I agree. Here in the US, we have, self-help books, titles like 10 Steps to or 12 Rules of Life.
Yeah.
Actually not the case, but I'm glad that you were able to communicate that, okay, it's not that simple in different organizations. You have to take account the business and the people and the industry you're in, and especially departments where you work. Um, are there particular questions leaders should ask employees to uncover these signals before they become visible informal metrics?
I think this answer is twofold. So on the one hand, I would say if it is management asking employees, I would start at a similar point. I would start with curiosity and just, actually sitting down beside an experienced employee and tell me how you get this done. Show me what you need to do to make this happen. And then just observe, let this employee walk you through, observe what they're doing, and you might uncover, there have been 5 steps written down, 7 are done. One of them might not be necessary, but one of them might actually come out of really good reason, and that is something that you need to be aware. Or, so also with AI and the use of AI, you can uncover a lot of patterns, and AI is really good in pattern detection, and I love that as a really good, assistance. But just because it has uncovered a pattern doesn't necessarily mean it tells you the reason why that pattern exists. So imagine you have like 2 teams, right? You have team A and team B, and AI discovers that team A always takes longer to resolve the issues, right? So one reason could be that they get the difficult cases. One context could be that the customers are always more satisfied when they have been receiving help from team A. It could be that team A is sort of like the buffer for team B, right? So that everything that team B doesn't want to handle gets handled by team A. So just because I have discovered something, I still need to have the curiosity as a leader to go out and ask, why? Why is this happening? What is going on behind it? So yeah, that would be like, my answer. So, sit down with the employees, let you explain what's actually doing. And on the other hand, use patterns, use AI, but be curious about the why behind it.
I'm curious to learn. Are you currently using AI to do your studies? Basically, this example you provided, and can you elaborate more on other use cases in your work?
Use cases, well, we use it obviously in financial industry. AI or corporate use of AI is become increasing, particularly if you look into something like financial crime and fraud detection, because it can analyze such a huge amount of data. No person could analyze that amount of data in anywhere near the same time. So that's a very good use case for financial industries, and where pattern detection is absolutely at its best. But you still have the human alongside it, right? So I'm a big fan of this, not having one point of where AI is doing everything, but having the human discernment beside it and alongside it, and like so at every step there's a human in there and can kind of like, go deeper, do less, do more. Personally, I use AI to a limited amount, to be honest. how do I describe that? Sometimes I use it as a sort of like thought exploration. So when I have an idea, I might go like, oh, I'm thinking about this, and then my setting is like that. My AI is always sort of like, I would say, almost challenging me. So, not saying yes to everything that I'm putting out there, but it's actually like asking me questions and challenging me. And that's something that I personally find quite useful, because I'm like, okay, I can explore an idea that would otherwise be maybe really annoying to somebody else. So, yeah, so I do use AI, but I wouldn't say in my personal manner I'm like a huge user, but I definitely see its benefits.
Uh, when you describe the AI use case with the example with the group A, group B, uh, I guess people will feel uncomfortable because nobody feels comfortable talking to a machine or talking to agent. I guess it feels out of bound. I take it.
Yeah, well, I think, you can use AI to just basically analyze the metrics that you already have. So be it ASG metrics, or be it like, the sort of satisfaction metrics from the customers, or the time, that it takes to handle complaints, for example. So I think that is absolutely a legitimate way to use AI for pattern detection, because that's like, it's data that is there anyhow. It's not data that's being created or used specifically for a purpose. But I think that's, as I said, it's only like part of the step. It's not the end all. It's like it can help you with that as a leader, as a manager, to see patterns that maybe you haven't seen before, or to uncover like, okay, there's always a problem with the handover and the process between process step 5 and process step 6, right? Why is it always taking longer at that process step? That's something that maybe an employee wouldn't have realized, but AI, with the multitude of data, it can identify that. But that's only the first point. You still need to continue on afterwards.
Definitely, definitely. If you, I don't know. I read the news that the AI was able to look at a proof and prove it was incorrect. So this mathematical equation where you can work back from the end to the beginning, sometimes not true. So there's some proofs that people have been doing it by hand for a long time. Now that you have AI with it, it pretty much clears your mind that, oh, okay, it wasn't the case, so it was wrong. So that's very interesting discoveries. I find it fascinating in these times.
Yeah,
Uh,
but definitely, yeah.
Going back to the book, you suggest that employees sometimes patch structural problems with kindness, loyalty, or personal effort. How can those positive human qualities unintentionally conceal a failing system?
So we all want to be nice, right? We all have this tendency of wanting to help, of wanting to do the best for our customer, of wanting to help our colleague, or satisfy our boss with really good results.
Yeah.
And that is all legitimate. That's we want that. We encourage that in terms of your company culture and team spirit, and we actually But I think, again, it depends on the measure of how much, how often you need to do something like that. If it's the occasional, Friday afternoon, I cover for my colleague because she's not able to do it, that's absolutely fine. If every single Tuesday I have to amend the Excel metrics manually because they're just not correct, and I always have to do it manually because the system is not producing the correct output, then that is something where I'm like, okay, this is not something that you should do. This is not something where you should be, kind and, carry the burden yourself. This is something that you should escalate, that you should find a solution for. So it really, everything is in life, I think, is like a question of how much.
Mhm.
A little bit of sugar is absolutely fine. A little bit of alcohol is absolutely fine. But, it's a measure of how much you do. And so I think it's the same with that, kindness and, carrying a burden for the company, that's absolutely fine. But if you're requested to carry a burden beyond the limits of your resources and your capabilities, then that's a structural issue. That's not an employee responsibility.
Yes, yes, and I guess it really depends on which industry and the office handles these issues and how you can limit or increase that level of interaction. I believe so. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Um,
And I know employee rights in the US are different from Europe, so I'm trying to be very general. But
have
yeah.
have you like been to a U.S. office? I know Europe. I've never been. I've never worked in Europe, so I don't know. I'm sure you're professional, organized, and on time, especially
No,
for Germany.
no, so the US not. So South America, yes, and like international companies operating in Europe or South America, that yes. Um, so there is cultural differences always, but I feel like the underlying human psychology, the underlying human strive, they are very similar, no matter in which context you actually work. So that it makes it comparable, I think.
What's that? What's that commonality that you found?
Oh, a lot, actually, a lot. So it's like actually everything that in the book I describe as patterns, for example, that
Mhm.
people, they start off doing something once, maybe before because they felt a need like that. And then they actually carried with them from one employee to the next, also although the setting has changed, that person has just accumulated that sort of behavior because they feel like they need to behave in a certain way, like people pleasing, or they need to be like very defensive about how they work, so they always have prepared like they have one answer and then they have five other backup answers just in case you're asking more. so they're like very overly prepared always.
Yeah.
And I think that is not something that depends on, do I work in Europe, do I work in the US, do I work in some other nation. That's just how humans behave in wherever context they're in, right? And I think you just need to be mindful of that. And it's not, yeah, it's just a pack that we all carry, and we just have to be aware of that pack.
I'm very nervous when I go to Germany. Oh my God, how's my German? Am I in the right escalator side? Uh, am I fast enough to leave the counter? All those social norms. It's very exhausting.
No, I think Germany is very welcoming, and it has become quite international. So especially younger generation, I think they are a lot more, internationally focused and everything. Um, and I think, yeah, it's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it.
I guess you would disagree if it was from Munich. Munich is
Well,
different, like a island of its own, an own culture.
yeah, there are a lot of regional specialities, I would say, but I guess you have that everywhere. So if you live um, in France, or if you live in England, you have like very kind of like, the people in the north are like that, the people in the south are like this, and it's the same in Germany. But I think in general, everybody is very mm, relaxed, I would say. So we're not as bad as we are made out sometimes.
Yes. Uh, okay, now we're moving to technology and artificial intelligence. You argued that formal systems depend on hidden human architecture that AI cannot replace merely by automating visible tasks. What parts of organization work are most likely to remain invisible to an AI system?
I think even if you input all of for example, the procedures and everything, and you're like, okay, automate this for me. I think what you're missing if you don't talk to employees alongside it is the actually why is it done like that. And again, I think why is the absolute utmost important question you can ever ask, because it then tells you, is it, for example, if somebody is like, we need to speak with the supplier. So like, okay, but why? Why do I need to speak with the supplier before I do this? Okay, because the supplier always knows, they always deliver on time, they always have everything prepared. So we like working with the supplier, right? And this is something, if you don't talk to the people, AI is not going to know that. So they're not going to know the sort of preferences that people have due to their work experience. or the issues they might have experienced, like, okay, no, absolutely no go, we're not going to do it like this because it has caused issues in the past. So as I say, if you collaboratively, absolutely fine, but you cannot expect it to just absorb this knowledge, this experience, if you don't actually investigate that in the first place, right?
Yeah, it does require detective work and being able to detect, ask better questions, be approachable, and get inside of the organizations. So that makes sense. Um, Before introducing an AI agent or automated decision systems, with you previously mentioned in your
Mhm.
use case, what should leaders investigate about how the work is actually being performed?
Mm, I think they have to be aware of the small steps in between, so between step 4 and step 5, there might be a 4.3 and there might be a 4.4. So, it's like small alignments that happen, when you're sitting in the cafeteria with your colleagues around lunch. You're like, oh, today I have to do this. And you're like, yeah, I will send you the data that you need, for example. It's like it's not really fixed in anything. And you just have to be really close to the team of like making sure that they are communicating that, and then you are able to decide, is this something we need to automate, is this something we need to consider or not. So I think it requires a lot of questions and a lot of mindfulness of, okay, maybe we have to amend later on. It's not, for me, I think the problem if some people think they implement it once or they investigate once and then it's like set for all time. And you're like, no, you have to go back, you have to see how it works, you have to identify if there's something aligned or misaligned, and then you need to fix it. So I think that would be always my, be open to change and adaptation. And it's not bad. Life is a constant cycle of changing and adapting and finding new meaning and finding new reasons to do things. It's the same with AI systems. You do it and then you change it.
Like all things, you gotta, yeah, you have to change. We're human beings and we have to move and move forward. Yeah. Um,
Definitely.
After reading your book, what do you hope leaders will begin noticing when they may previously have dismissed or overlooked?
I hope on the one hand they are noticing the small things a bit more, so they are more appreciative of the human effort that goes into, completing tasks and having green KPIs. But I think I also hope that they would be just more inquisitive, asking more questions, being more curious about the hows and the whys. Because I think that is actually the potential for using opportunities and growth, because then you can find, efficiency points where you're like, okay, but why are we doing this? Oh, we don't need to do this, so, forget about it. Or you can find things of, making a lot more resilient decisions if you know actually why people might be hesitant about something or might feel like there is a problem. And I think it requires just this of being curious and being seeing and then asking the questions.
Um, what are you continuing? What are you continuing to investigate that may shape the next stage of your work? Are you doing any work that is planning the future stages of a book, talk, or any future plans?
A lot. So I always have a lot of plans and I always have a lot of ideas, and it's more a matter of selecting and finding the time of what to do and how to kind of like pace myself of like, okay, let's do this now and then no, so right now I'm actually very interested in everything surrounding governance and politics, actually. So, going from institutions and systems to actually this sort of system theory application to, nations. Because again, that is a very complex relationship, and it's really cool to kind of look into this and kind of scale it up if you look into that. So that's something that right now is a lot of fun for me. I don't know if it's going to be a book or not, but it's cute. It's interesting. But so right now, I think I'm just really happy to continue exploring and meeting people, and then see how it develops from there. Really.
Or you can do a webinar with us and discuss that idea. I think that would be valuable for our listeners for future talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely happy to do any sort of engagement. And I think just by talking to people, you learn a lot, and that might give me more ideas, so it might be.
Definitely. More ideas, or maybe this formation of another book. So that's good. Where can listeners learn more about your research and follow the publication of your book?
So I would say either to my LinkedIn profile. That is like where I'm not massively active, but at least once a week or twice a week there will be a little bit of news, and definitely there's also my website. So if you're interested into just more of the background theories and the sort of surrounding areas, if that makes sense. So the academic theory and everything that sits behind the book, that would be my website. It's luneos.eu. I'm sure we can write it somewhere because yeah. So, and otherwise I would just say my LinkedIn, happy to connect, reach out as you did, Henry, and then really happy to just always meet new people.
Definitely. Any events coming up? Any presentation talks for you, Laurin?
Not right now. We have planned something maybe for the start of November when the book is being launched, but there is no final confirmation yet. But as soon as I get final confirmation from my publisher, that will always be communicated on both. So either the LinkedIn or the website, and I will keep you posted.
And US release too, right?
Yes, it is. It is actually being published by Productivity Press, so they are part of Routledge. So it's a US publisher, and it's going to be published first and foremost in the US.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Laurin, thank you so much for being a great guest. And we didn't get a chance to talk about banking regulation, but I would love for you to come back and we could talk about that topic in a more respectful and thoughtful way.
Absolutely fine. I really enjoyed this experience, and thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So this wraps up another episode of Orlando Insights podcast. If you want to hear more conversations with Laurin, visit our website, orlandoinsightspodcast.com, and our website, orlandoinsightgroup.com. I'll see you on the next conversation. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye, everyone.